Film is dream. Film is music. No art passes our conscience in the way film does. It goes directly to our feelings, deep down into the dark rooms of our souls. Ingmar Bergman. What Ingmar Bergman saw film wasn't the reality of movies in the early days. The infancy of cinema was unsure and sickly, so a good portion of it was a product of commercialization. Thomas Edison's kinetoscope highlights that, capitalizing and growing the fad so that to the average consumer, they were showed popular actors and sensationalist dances of the days, while filming hundreds of minute-long shorts of cities to showcase the technological capabilities to would-be investors. What's lost to history is the relatively liberal early years of film, dominated by the working classes and their looser moral standards. From crude humor to sophisticated treatments of female sexuality to borderline burlesque shows pulled straight from the vaudeville stage, films were made for the masses. As the fad grew, so did the audience of working class women, becoming more and more unencumbered from work. In my opinion, nothing is of greater importance to the success of the motion picture interest than films of good moral tone, Edison said to the popular trade journal for film exhibitors at the time, Moving Picture World, in 1907. Edison was most likely just as aware as the progressives to try and protect the mental decency of women and children. In a year after he expressed his concern, Edison had passed the Motion Pictures Patent Company. The MPPC secured the inventor's hold on the American film market in 1908, and limited production to only a select few to use the American patents he had created. It temporarily cut out the independent filmmaker, who wouldn't rise until the birth of Hollywood, and helped curb the feared so-called salacious content fed to the lower classes. Progressivism. The progressive fight lasted roughly from 1890 to 1920. The 30-odd year time frame saw the likes of Teddy Roosevelt, Jane Addams, and Upton Sinclair. All had a similar goal, to clean up the urban mess. The progressive platform was embraced by a new middle class. With the new free time allowed to them, they turned to what they believed would better their communities and their country. They formed clubs and held rallies, and had time for new forms of entertainment, namely, the movies. Before the progressive influence of film, moving picture shows, as they were called, were mainly the domain of the working classes. Nickelodeon's cost a nickel, and as movie houses tried to outcompete the other, playing 4 to 5 one-reel films at the same price wasn't uncommon. It's estimated that by 1910, more than 25% of New Yorkers attended movies weekly, and in Chicago, 43. The middle-class reformers saw films as the perfect means to get their message across to the lower classes. By 1908, Moving Picture World rallied for censorship. Things like crude humor or infidelities were not American, the popular film industry journal wrote, attempting to distance themselves from the highly provocative and extremely competitive French film scene. Variety wrote in 1908, "Europe may like that sort of thing, we don't, and don't want to." Even the famed feminist Dr. Anna Shaw had something to say, calling for a policewoman at every movie theater and inside. "These are recruiting stations of vice," she told the press. Magistrate Frederick B. House claimed that 95% of the moving picture places in New York are dens of iniquity. More young women and girls are led astray in these places than any other way. It was clear. The movies had to be cleaned. Progressive films. The first thing progressives did was attempt to fix lighting by city ordinances. When that helped, they moved on to adding restrooms, nurseries for babies, ushers, deodorizing agents, refreshments, decorations, and the final teardown of vaudeville acts. The MPPC, sympathetic to the cause and realizing the falling popularity among the higher-paying, middle-class patrons, initially responded by copying the new film d'art movement in France, ironically enough. Production soon began on short reel renditions of Shakespeare plays and other classics, confident in the fact that they were not only uplifting the audience, but also educating them. Articles in the time, though, suggest that the storylines could be hard to follow for the lower classes. What eventually stayed, a successful middle ground, was a mix of sensationalism and morality in original stories like these. The Cry of the Children, a 1912 Thanhouser Company film, told the story of a rich factory owner and his employees. The film centers of a poor family who works for him. who by the end of it, their younger daughter dies from overwork. It was controversial for the fact that it was filmed in a real factory, including the background workers. For His Son was a 1912 biograph film that showed the dangers of cocaine and soft drinks, including the made-up drink Doba Coke and criticism of Coca-Cola. Land Beyond the Sunset was another progressive film, a 1912 Edison adventure that told the story of a young boy, oppressed by his grandmother, that goes on an outing in the country with a social welfare group. It showed the heavenly nature attributed to those social reformers as a place of reprieve for the newspaper boy. The film ends as he leaves his grandmother and fulfills his destiny to row away into the pure ocean. So were the progressives successful? Maybe not exactly in films or ways of entertainment as they wanted to be, but perhaps it was for the best. The progressives moved their attention to other places, more expansive reforms such as the passage of women's suffrage in 1919, and in the same year, the Volstead Act to constitutionally ban alcohol. By the late 1910s, the MPPC had all been but dissolved. In 1915, the ruling of Mutual Film Corp versus Industrial Commission of Ohio determined that the monopoly of patents was in the violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Better and more interesting films from independents and foreign markets had weakened it too. The audience moved on to what the old companies just couldn't seem to produce: innovative art. The new films of the late 1910s and 20s included game changers like The Birth of a Nation, Metropolis, and Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. The lifting of the MPPC finally allowed foreign films like The Passion of Joan of Arc and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to dominate American screens. Though the flow of immorality may have stopped for a bit through their hands, the cracks only widened without their presence. The rise of even more risque subject matter soon prevailed on screen. Theda Barr's Vamp, a character whose films were restricted to minors. Louise Brooks's Pandora's Box, a stunning show of how sexuality could be a plot device. The 1921 Cleopatra, with a female wearing close to nothing, all showed how unsuccessful their attempts had been.